So my name's Mike Hanna. You're all very welcome to this evening's annual address. It's my privilege to be the director of the Institute. This is the 60th annual address. And I'd particularly like to welcome our guest speaker, Professor Patrick Chinnery, the Executive Chair of the MRC. I also would like to welcome senior colleagues from the university, Professor Geraint, Rees, Vice-Provost Rees, who's kindly agreed to do the vote of thanks, and also the Vice President for Operations, Amy Chappell, who's here. That's great. So welcome to you all. So it's traditional that I just kind of talk a bit about the last 12 months at the Institute for about 20 minutes and then introduce the main speaker. So first and foremost, I just want to thank all the staff and students at the Institute for incredible work over the last 12 months, and I'm going to describe some of that work to you today. It's each time I put these slides together, it is just, I think, amazing what you all managed to achieve. We have great teams supporting the whole of the Institute. So Helen Crutzen is the Institute manager, and she leads all the professional services, and we have 6 really excellent deputy directors, and I want to thank all of them and all of these teams. I particularly want to thank Navida and Sandra, who are at the back, who have organised today and work really hard all through the year. So thank you to them as well. The professional services teams underpin everything that we do. It's really crucial, the work that they do. Sometimes it's a bit of a thankless task for them. And I just want to highlight that today and thank them all. This is them having a nice away day led by Helen in July. I also want to thank Alan Thompson and the faculty office, and also all of the colleagues across the faculty that we work with to try and deliver our mission of research and education. In the last few years, I've sort of talked a bit about COVID. Hopefully we're emerging, or have emerged now, of course, from the pandemic, and hopefully we have learned the lessons of the pandemic as outlined to us in last year's annual address by Patrick Vallance. One of the early successes in terms of understanding the disease and how it affected the nervous system was this work from Queen Square, which really in early 2020, which was really near the beginning of the pandemic, characterized in detail the neurological manifestations, and that's turned out to be remarkably accurate and has become something of a citation classic. I want to thank Selina Ray, who's in the audience, for putting together the annual report for this year. The QR code is fresh off the press and I understand is live now. So if you scan the QR code, hopefully you'll see the annual report. And this really summarizes a lot of the work that's happened at the Institute over this last year. And I'm just going to talk about a fraction of it. It always amazes me to see just how productive you all are. So a huge output of publications, including in top-tier, so-called top-tier journals. So a really highly productive year in terms of research outputs. We continue to increase our grant income. So we now have £356 million in active research grants, which is a steady increase, as you'll see, over the years that I've been the director. The trend, of course, is positive in terms of the contribution, which is important to sustain the university. So with the executive team, we met in January and talked about our strategy. We're pretty clear about what we're doing. It's no surprise to all of you, to really do the best possible science, to deeply understand mechanisms of brain health and disease. And wherever possible, I think our USP is to be thinking about translating this into prevention, diagnostics and therapies to help patients. Obviously to educate and train the next generation to have impact, and importantly to have a supportive, respectful, diverse community driving partnerships. And we work hard to be financially and increasingly carbon sustainable. So this is what the Institute is really all about. The powerhouse of our Institute are the 8 research departments led by 5 women and 4 men, illustrated here. And I'll talk about some of the highlights of the research from the departments. But before I do that, I just want to talk about some of the platforms that we've tried to create in the last few years to maximize translational impact. The first is the Leonard Wolfson Experimental Neurology Centre, which is, was established with a £20 million award about 10 years ago. It's a first-in-man experimental trial centre and has been extremely successful in early phase trials, increasingly of genetic therapies, as indicated here. And in the last year alone, there have been 67 active clinical studies, including first-in-man studies for example, gene silencing. And the balance is about 67% commercial trials and 33% PI-led trials across the diseases indicated here. And it's all led by Vincenzo, who does a really great job. A bottleneck that we identified was the lack of a research pharmacy for developing advanced therapies. We managed to secure funding indicated here, and an advanced research pharmacy is now being built, and it's a collaboration with the Cancer Institute and Ear Institute, and this will open in 2025. And I just want to thank Laura and Jat for all the work they did in making this happen. So this will allow us to make up gene therapy products, for example, and other advanced therapy products for delivery to patients in the trials unit. We also were able to use some of this funding to develop a Queen Square Clinical Trial Centre, which is complementary to the Wolfson, and this is more for later phase clinical trials, and is a partnership with the hospital because it will partly involve accessing NHS beds for research when that's possible, and we're building a core team to do that. And we also managed to secure some additional funding from UCL to extend our trials unit capacity, and a new extension to the Wolfson facility will open early next year, which is, it's just to prove that it has been built. There's a picture here. The other area that we developed to try and help our investigators think about taking forward their discoveries to have impact was a sort of enterprise team led by Dimitri and Eleonora. And this was really to promote awareness of the resources that exist in the university, particularly the Translational Research Office, but also helping researchers think about what are the steps to commercialization or partnering with industry. And this has turned out to be very effective. Our enterprise income in the last year is 13.5 million, and we've got 2 new spin-outs, which I was hoping to be able to tell you today, but I can't quite tell you, otherwise I'll go to jail. But we did have a spin-out last year, which I can tell you about, which has continued to be successful, and which we hope will develop additional drugs for Alzheimer's disease. This is illustrated here. And then the final platform, just to tell you about, is a partnership with the Institute of Child Health. I'm grateful to Ross Smythe, who was the director at the time. We established this unit at Queen Square, and the mission of which is to embed RNA and AAV genetic therapy, both basic and clinical, into our programs, because a lot of our researchers were independently starting to do this, and it's going to be a big area, and is a big area in neurological diseases. This is led by Francesco, Joe and Sarah, and they've already done well just in the last 2 years in terms of grant funding. And they're developing the genetic therapy platform core, which will be one of the core facilities in Gray's Inn Road. So those are just some platforms that are developed and are, I think, helping. Of course, partnerships are fundamental to translation, and all of these are key partners in our programs. The BRC is very important. We have 2 themes led from here by Nick and Olga. We partner closely with the hospital and colleagues in the hospital, as well as, of course, the faculty and UCL partners and the neuroscience domain. So partnership working is a fundamental process in really trying to get more impact and translate our research. And the other key partners, of course, are our charity partners and philanthropy partners, and I particularly want to mention OVPA, who we work with very closely, BRUK, and the National Brain Appeal. So, first, thank you to all the heads for all of the slides you sent me, all of the incredible breakthroughs. I've tried to distill it down I've tried to mention a few from each department. It is incredible what you're all doing, and it's a privilege to be able to present it. So in the Department of Imaging Neuroscience, led by Martina, their focus is on functional brain imaging. It incorporates the Max Planck Center. Here are two nice papers in current biology. I was particularly interested in Steve Fleming's paper, which is about working out where in the brain the symbolic and non-symbolic representations of zero is. It turns out it's the posterior association cortex. So I think I need to develop that area, so when people come to ask me about space, I can ask them, I can respond appropriately. This department, of course, developed SPM, which is now one of the most widely used neuroimaging analysis softwares in the world, which is incredibly impressive. And it was really nice to see that Demis Hassabis, who jointly won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the AlphaFold protein structure prediction research, was actually a PhD student, did his PhD at the Institute, and was supervised by one of our outstanding scientists, Eleanor Maguire. She was his primary supervisor, so that was a very nice development. The Department of Neuromuscular Disease is led by Linda Greensmith, a big focus on ALS research, both from discovery right through to clinical trials. They've established a very prominent international symposium in its fourth year, which is now, I think, the major, certainly UK meeting for ALS research. Many awards in this department. So Mary Riley received 2 awards, including the Osler Medal at the annual meeting of the Association of Physicians of Great Britain and Ireland. And James Slay was awarded a Senior MRC Non-Clinical Fellowship, and Andrea Malaspina an award for his innovative work in ALS. And in terms of discovery science in this department, impressive work from Giuseppe Schiavo in relation to tetanus toxin and a novel trafficking route for proteins. And then also really interesting work from Pietro Fratta demonstrating that cryptic exon translation could potentially be a new mechanism for ALS downstream of the TDP43 dysfunction that's been so well described. And our major gene hunter, and probably one of the world's leading people in gene discovery, Henry Holden, continues to be prolific in discovering new genes. In the Department of Brain Repair and Rehabilitation, led by Dave Waring, which has a focus on stroke and neurosurgery, interesting work from Hanny Marcus around the whole issue of surgical robotics for neurosurgery. There's an incredible strong history of stroke research at the Institute, and actually the first demonstration of the whole concept of the ischemic penumbra was at the Institute 40 years ago, led by the surgeon Lindsay Simon. And this, of course, is the whole basis of thrombolysis therapy that's helped millions of people around the world. But then bringing that right up to date, just this month in the Lancet, Dave has led the Optimas trial, which has shown that anticoagulation early after stroke in patients with atrial fibrillation is in fact safe, because we all thought you had to wait 2 weeks, and so that's an important clinical practice development. Tony Shapira leads the Department of Clinical and Movement Neuroscience with Tom Warner, major focus on Parkinson's disease. Here's a repurposing drug trial, a large trial of ambroxol, to see if this will slow the progression of Parkinson's. And then Sonia Gandhi and Tom Fultony have established the Edmund J. Safra Accelerating Clinical Trials in Parkinson's Disease platform trial, snappy title, and this is to be able to test multiple drugs at the same time, a very innovative trial methodology, and they've got major funding to do that, which is fantastic. And I particularly want to congratulate our colleague Kailash Bhatia, who's now the EAN President-elect. As you all know, he is truly a world-leading clinician and academic in movement disorders. So turning to the Department of Neurodegenerative Diseases, headed up by Nick and Sarah, they continue to be incredibly successful and have an incredible history, actually. So the first gene discovery, the APP gene mutations, was discovered by John Hardy at the Institute on families identified by Martin Rosser, and then research doing brain imaging to quantify volume loss has become a very important tool in Alzheimer's and dementia research. And then just recently, the dementia team here have been involved in landmark trials for the first drug that seems to have a disease-modifying effect in Alzheimer's. So a really amazing history. And bringing that right up to date, they're playing a major role leading in biomarker studies to see if the p-tau217 biomarker could be an accurate, sensitive, reliable way of diagnosing Alzheimer's from blood samples. And this is working closely with UK DRI colleagues, particularly Henrik Zetterberg in the biomarker lab at Queen Square. And another really important development in dementia is that we're going to open the world's first Centre for Excellence for Education and Research into Rare Dementias. A building has been acquired near to here, and this will open in 2025. 7.5 million has been raised in combination with the National Brain Appeal, and so that's a really great development. Turning to the Huntington's disease part of this department, led by Sarah and Jill. So Sarah, we want to congratulate, has been elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society and also an international member of the National Academy of Medicine of the USA. Amazing achievements. And similarly, Jill has been as receiving the Ferrier Medal and lecture from the Royal Society. So really, really impressive achievements for their fantastic work over many years. Although Sarah's not that old, and neither is Jill. Here's an example of the sort of work they're doing: major funding, major basic science research, but also trials, including some of the world's first studies. For example, the RNAi study for HTT. The first patient has been enrolled. So an incredibly impressive group. We're very proud to be hosting the headquarters of the UK Dementia Research Institute and to work with the new director, Siddhartha Chandran. This is 7 centres across the UK. Karen Duff leads the science at the centre here. She successfully led their QQR, and things are progressing really well. And they do a whole range of really impressive basic science with the team, and just some examples of the sort of work they're doing, trying to deeply understand the fundamental mechanisms of neurodegeneration. So this is really important work. And then two more departments, the Department of Clinical and Experimental Epilepsy, again, a major force in world research in epilepsy, fundamental research here from Dimitri's lab. And recently they've set up a spin-out company, which I think I am allowed to tell you about, which is the Epilepsy GTX, which is around gene therapy for focal epilepsy. And that's looking really exciting, and I think going into patient studies very soon. And of course, this department was fundamental in terms of research which has led to safe epilepsy surgery for focal epilepsy. Work in this department over many years by many colleagues, some in this room, has meant that epilepsy surgery is now a safe and fairly standard part of the options for patients with intractable epilepsy. And then the Department of Neuroinflammation is led by Olga, and they do research into all aspects of inflammation, particularly MS, both in terms of trials, imaging, and fundamental science, trying to understand mechanisms such as Ken Smith's work here. And they also have an incredible legacy, having made massive contributions over the years to the whole field of MS with landmark papers shown here. So just switching to a few other areas that are important for the Institute. So we all are very aware of climate change and the importance this now is. The Institute, we appointed a deputy director focused entirely on climate change, who's Sanjay Sisodia, and he's done really a lot of work in a short space of time over the past 2 or 3 years. And this is a paper in the Lancet Neurology just highlighting what evidence does exist and showing that the incidence, prevalence and severity of many neurological conditions that we deal with could be adversely affected by increasing ambient temperature, and that actually there's very little research into this, and so this publication highlighted this. It received huge media attention and has had over 400 separate media outlet listings. But Sanjay is also with the Climate Crisis Committee at the Institute doing a lot of other things. So awareness is being increased by him setting up the Hot Brain Annual Conference, which is now done in partnership with the Lancet Neurology, and that's been very successful. There's a whole range of local actions, and all our labs have gold leaf standards, and many of our offices are getting that. And Sanjay is also doing research to try and understand the effects of temperature on different model systems that are relevant to neurological disease. So we're absolutely committed to supporting a positive culture at the Institute. I want to thank Hélène Plume-Favreau and Dimitrios for all their work. It is remarkable that we have 109 colleagues. 13% of all our staff are involved in aspects of the EDI work, which is, I think, very impressive. I think there's a genuine interest in driving this agenda forward. They've published an EDI report for the Institute. They do that every year. We have a code of conduct, which I think is really important. And also important is we had an away day, and we celebrated awards for colleagues who have exemplified the sort of principles that we all want to adhere to. And so I just want to congratulate all of those colleagues for their fantastic work in this area. So switching now just to promotions. So we had an unbelievably successful year. Many promotions at the early career stage, which is really important, I think, for the future. You'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to read out all of their names. There's about 4 slides, but I just want to congratulate all of these colleagues who have done well. It's not easy to get promoted at UCL. It's not like some other universities. So it's really good. So I'm just going to go through to congratulate all of these colleagues. These are all early career promotions. And then the senior promotions was also successful, so congratulations to these colleagues. Again, it's a big achievement, and to these colleagues who were promoted to the professorial level. So well done. Also, thanks to these colleagues who've given huge service to the Institute over many years, who are retiring. I want to thank them all for their fantastic work supporting our research programs. Sad news this year, as many of you will know, is that our colleague Richard Orrell, a consultant neurologist and specialist in ALS with an international reputation, died prematurely and very unexpectedly. That was very sad news for the Institute. We're also sorry to see the passing of David Thomas, who was the head of the neurosurgery department here until 2006. Just switching to education, so we have a big program of education, both masters and PhDs, which has increased dramatically in the last 12 years, and we have a great team supporting all the students, led by Alex, both locally and at the faculty level. I won't read out all your names, but I just want to thank all of you who really dedicate yourselves to supporting the master's students. This is really, really important, and you do a fantastic job. And we were very pleased that this year, for the first time ever, the Institute of Neurology has started an undergraduate course, and we've started our Human Neuroscience BSc, led by James Kilner, which is great. So we have a prize to give. We have a Queen Square Essay Prize, which has been awarded, I think, for 30 plus years for an essay of exceptional quality. So I'm very pleased to award this prize. This is an extremely valuable envelope, which I'm going to give to Kira, who won the prize for the essay listed here. So well done.
Thank you.
So I've almost finished, but I can't do an annual address without telling you about this building, which we had an idea in 2011. I didn't realize it would take this long. It began with a line drawing that I did for my director's interview. So it's progressing. It's going to be finished in 2026. All the money has been raised. It's going to be amazing. So the idea is we're going to have what we call a dual hub. So the Gray's Inn Road site is a 5 to 8 minute walk away from here. This is the idea that we're going to have mainly laboratory research at the Gray's Inn Road end of this dual hub. There will be patient services there as well. We think this co-location of patients and science is important. At the Queen Square end, it's going to be mainly the clinical research. Roughly 400 of our staff will be in each location, and that's all progressing. And I think it's going to be an incredible environment for you all to be even more successful and ultimately find new therapies for patients. I can't resist showing you a few pictures of the progress. So we started building in 2021. There are many people who have helped progress this, and I can't name them all, but it's an incredible team effort across UCL, which is amazing. And Alan is the sponsor. So we had the burial of the time capsule, we've had the topping out ceremony, all very exciting events. The building is out of the ground, you'll be pleased to hear, and it's progressing. And these are just some further images of it. And this is what it will look like in the end. So a truly world-class centre for you who are all world-leading neuroscientists. So here's the comparison image, so the projected completion image and what it looks like now. So it is getting closer and closer, which is great. A key thing about the new building is different ways of working. We're going to have all these core technology platforms, and GP Schiavo and others have led on developing this, that will be shared across the building. So this will mean you'll have the latest technology that will be renewed, and it'll be truly state-of-the-art. And we've actually started to install some of this equipment in Queen Square House, and we're going to transfer it when the building opens. And so some of this is already live, so that you can start to benefit from this technology straight away. And it is, of course, a partnership. So UCLH, UCL, IoN, and DRI, and the DRI national headquarters are in this building. So finally, just to look back a little bit before we look forward, and we look forward to Patrick's talk. So UCL, founded in 1826. A few years later, the National Hospital, where we are now, was opened. The National Hospital consultants decided they needed a research institute, and they established the Institute of Neurology, so it's born of the hospital. It became a postgraduate institute of University of London in 1950. And in 1977, this state-of-the-art building was put up. At the time, this was absolutely the best possible building you could have. I know you don't all still agree with that. And it is actually remarkable. I think it's really remarkable that in 46 years, the research that's happened in this building or close by has had massive impact for patients with neurological disease. So I've mentioned the ischemic penumbra, thrombolysis, a global treatment for stroke. You all will be aware of Anita Harding. She absolutely was a pioneer and probably the first person to really develop neurogenetics, and that's led to diagnostic neurogenetics, which is common now and benefits many patients. Major programs in Parkinson's and ALS, major programs in imaging, MS, statistical parametric mapping, and Alzheimer's, and major advances in neurosurgical interventions, all either in this building or very close to it, or with people who had space in this building. I think that's quite remarkable. So then you sort of think, well, what are the success factors for such an ecosystem of innovation? And I think these are the things that I think are important. So a brand new state-of-the-art environment, that's what Queen Square House was, believe it or not, in 1977. We're going to have that in the next year or so. get the best people. We've clearly got the best people, and work in an interdisciplinary, positive way. And I think co-location of patients with the science, I think, is important, so we ask the right questions. And then, of course, this is altogether an inspiring environment for students. So I think that's what the dual hub is going to create, because we still have big challenges. So dementia, neurodegeneration, progress is being made, but it's still a huge societal challenge. Single gene rarer diseases are still a big problem, but hopefully gene therapies will be developed. Brain tumours has not really advanced the therapy for 50 years. Neuroinflammation, and about 40% of patients with epilepsy still don't have fully controlled seizures. So I think we're in a very good position to really try and make a difference. So now to the main event. So I'm really pleased to introduce my colleague, Professor Patrick Chinnery. Patrick trained in medicine in Newcastle and did his neurology in Newcastle. He became a consultant there and then was director of the Institute of Genetics for a number of years in Newcastle before moving to Cambridge, where he became head of department. He has an international reputation for his work on mitochondrial disease, mitochondrial genetics, the mitochondrial genetic bottleneck. And then more recently, he's taken a further step and has become the executive chair of the MRC. So it's a real pleasure to introduce Patrick to give his talk. Which is a bit alarming. Medical research, dial 111. Patrick.
Thanks very much. Sorry for the disruption. Tom, thank you very much for that. And Mike, thank you for the very kind introduction. It is genuinely an honour to be here to give the 60th UCL Institute of Neurology annual address. And without any prior preparation, I want to begin with this slide here, because these three individuals inspired me to begin my career in medical science. John Morgan Hughes, many of you will remember, an NHS neurologist, and Professors P.K. Thomas and Anita Harding that we've just heard about from Mike. And the reason why I want to begin with them is because they set me on my journey that's brought me here today, but also because I believe very sincerely that what they were doing is exactly what the MRC should be supporting. They were using astute clinical observation, engaging laboratory scientists, using state-of-the-art technology to advance our understanding of disease and to take that back into the clinic. That's what the MRC is about, and I'm going to build the case over the next half hour to 40 minutes to convince you that that's where we need to get back to. Now, why have I got a picture of the larder there on the left side? Well, the reason is twofold. One, John Morgan Hughes and Nick Wood were my PhD examiners. So actually my career began down here, and we began our PhD viva in Anita Harding's office. She'd just died prematurely a few months before. And after 2 hours, Morg stood up and said, "That's enough. We're continuing the viva in the larder." And so I completed my PhD in the Queen's larder. And of course, it also reminds me not to go on too long this evening. So when I'm not at the MRC or in Cambridge with my lab and at the clinic and not being given jobs by my wife, I like to read history. And so over the last year, I've read quite a lot about the history of the MRC, and it's important to reflect back. When you read the literature that's out there, it is remarkable how many of the challenges that they faced a century ago are recurring problems today. The interpersonal differences, the tensions across the country, across government and with different funders. And there's a lot to learn from how they handled the issue at the time. Now, I've just completed my first birthday in this role. I'm actually the 13th head of the MRC. It's unlucky for some. The first was Walter Morley Fletcher, and interestingly, only Fletcher and myself are Cambridge academics. Fletcher was brought in because the government had a problem. And the problem was endemic tuberculosis. And it became an acute issue during the Boer War because the people they were recruiting didn't have the muscle mass to be able to carry out the activities that were required to carry out the battles in South Africa. And so it was a very pragmatic reason the MRC was formed with £50,000. That equates to about 8 million quid in today's money. And Fletcher was brought in because of his interest in muscle physiology. And you can see one of the referees' reports from one of his papers with Gowland's Hopkins. It looks like a clean run, just like your recent submission to the New England Journal, Mike. Published in full without any modifications. Now, Fletcher, wouldn't agree with all of his views, but he believed passionately in the importance of curiosity-driven science, discovery science. And so from the very outset, this has been central to what the MRC is about. But it has evolved over the years. And it began during the time of David Lloyd George, the Liberal government, around 1911. The National Insurance Act was being negotiated. Winston Churchill, then a Liberal politician, was very much involved in this. And he was setting up a new deal across the country, a form of taxation that would give some security to people, particularly if they fell ill and were not able to work anymore. And the 4 pence that they were requested to give in a year, 1 pence of that was committed to medical research. And that's how the £50,000 was found, and that's how the MRC was born. And its first venue was close to the heart of government. If you go to Queen Anne's Gate, which is just south of St James's Park, near to Cockpit Steps, you'll see the 2 buildings where the MRC offices were first established. And a key document that led to the formation of the first research council, the Medical Research Council, was written by JBS Haldane, a UCL academic, a biochemist, and he wrote a remarkable book about his image for research over the next 100 years, and it's really shaped the landscape in the country. It's recommended that the government departments should oversee the specific research, but general research should be under the control of autonomous research councils, which should be free from political and administrative pressures that might discourage research in certain areas. Very insightful today, and has stood us in good stead over the last century. And this is the Haldane principle, of course. But it wasn't easy riding. There was a lot of resistance to the formation of the MRC, interestingly, from the Royal College of Physicians. The physicians did not like the idea of medical research. They did not like the challenge to Harley Street. They were practicing an art, and they saw this as a threat. And they were fighting against this from the outset. And contrary to that, Fletcher was very keen for the research councils to be disconnected from the Ministry of Health, which delivered health service. He thought that hosting the MRC within the Ministry of Health would be a narrow and mistaken course. And the debates are very interesting and really quite analogous to 15 years ago when NIHR was formed. Very similar wheels were being reinvented. But that's why the MRC sits in its own place and now ultimately sits in a different department to the Department of Health and Social Care. I'm not going to go through all the executive directors and CEOs, but I will mention Edward Mellenby, who was the second one. So Mellenby was a biochemist from West Hartlepool, and he was the executive chair after he'd done pivotal work observing in communities and noting the link between diet and rickets. And he discovered vitamin D, amongst other vitamins, and led to major reform in public health in the country, and wrote this book which really I've learned a lot from reflecting on, and that is that the state has an absolute commitment and need to support medical research, and it can transform the population. But what about neuroscience? What about UCL, and what about the Institute of Neurology? Well, a key figure in the history that we can learn a lot from is Henry Dale. Henry Dale partly spent his career here at UCL, won the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Physiology jointly in 1936 for discovering acetylcholine and really working out the chemistry of neural transmission. But he didn't just deliver research himself, he was also visionary and saw the need for national research infrastructure in medical research. And it was really his energy which led to the additional resource being found to produce the first National Institute for Medical Research. And the idea here was to take the research out of the centre of London, away from the noise and traffic, into Hampstead, to Mount Vernon. And this is the Hampstead building, which is the very first National Institute of Medical Research. It was quite effective for a while. It saw an expansion of bacteriology, new discipline, saw an expansion of biochemistry. It's where Dale did a lot of his key work. but clearly it was not fit for purpose. And in particular, Dale thought that it was a very sniffy and snobbish neighbourhood. So not much has really changed over the last decade. And in actual fact, the precipitant event for closing down the Hampstead building and moving to Dale's new empire at Mill Hill was complaints from the local residents about the dogs, the experimental dogs barking overnight. It wasn't tolerated, and the building was shut down on that basis. And the Mill Hill building was formed and was really a cornerstone of the MRC's medical research, seeing the establishment of medical statistics, for example, as a discipline, which led to Bradford Hill and all the discoveries around smoking later on in the 20th century. And ultimately, in partnership with UCL, the creation of the Francis Crick Institute, for which you have a very key role to play, both delivering the science and also providing opportunities to capitalise on medical research across the whole of the UCL campus. But it wasn't all about London, and throughout the early part of the last century there was investment across the country. There were actually institutes set up in Edinburgh around endocrine disease, in Manchester and in Liverpool and in South Wales too, and some of the very large first very large clinical trials were carried out through the MRC. Actually, looking at TB vaccination before the NHS, they managed to recruit 45,000 children into these studies before the NHS. Absolutely remarkable. But of course, the MRC's support in Cambridge in the Cavendish Laboratory, and also Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins at King's College, led to the discovery of the structure of DNA, and a Nobel Prize to two of those individuals. And this led to subsequent investment in Cambridge in the formation of the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, an early recruit being Cesar Milstein from Argentina, the biochemist who won the Nobel Prize for the hybridoma technique, which allowed the synthesis of monoclonal antibodies, which was subsequently exploited by Greg Winter and others to develop new therapeutics. And just two more to go. Fred Sanger, also at the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, won 2 Nobel Prizes supported by the MRC, the latter for working out how to sequence DNA for the first time, and several of us in the audience will remember these gels. And last but not least, for this audience, Peter Mansfield in Nottingham, who intermittently was supported by the MRC and led to his really rather brave experiments to do magnetic resonance imaging on human subjects for the first time. So why am I telling you about all these Nobel Prize winners that have been supported by the MRC? Well, I'm telling you about them because they developed the technologies that are the basis of much of the research that you described to us, Mike, in the previous talk. Magnetic resonance imaging, genomics and genome sequencing, neuroimmune therapies that target specific components of the immune system, and of course stem cells with John Gurdon at what is now the Gurdon Institute. So these have underpinned modern neuroscience research. And the question for me as Executive Chair of the MRC is how do we harness these and what are the next big challenges? What are the next equivalents to tuberculosis, which was the pressing issue back in the early part of the 20th century? And I suppose it's fair to say that I do have some bias, but from my perspective, the neurological pathologies that we see are an emerging and growing challenge that faces the country. There's been major progress developing treatments for cancer. Public health interventions are dramatically reducing cardiovascular disease, but neurological disorders continue to increase. And the data from the Neurological Alliance recently notes that 1 in 6 people in the country have a neurological diagnosis, and less than 15% of that is stroke and dementia. It's a major burden to the NHS. These data are a little out of date now, but £4.4 billion in a year due to neurological conditions, and it's on the increase. And of course, the epidemiological projections for neurodegenerative disease across the globe, but particularly in the developing and developed world, predict a huge increase in dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases as the population continues to age. It's an emerging public health crisis, and the government funders need to respond to this challenge. So how can the MRC address the challenge with yourselves? Well, it's very different in 2024 to the time of Henry Dale or Walter Morley Fletcher. Back then, the MRC was the only show in town. It's now a very complex funding landscape. And what we've seen, particularly in the last 20 years, here at Queen Square and across the whole of the research portfolio, is an expansion of the number of techniques, the number of approaches that are being developed and applied across biomedical science in general. That, combined with inflation and a flat budget in real terms over the last 10 years, means that the jam is being spread thinner and thinner at a time when it's really challenging, particularly in academia, to recruit and retain the most talented individuals. So there are major challenges ahead. Now, the UK life sciences sector is estimated to be about £110 billion turnover. So this is a substantial part of the economy. And when we looked at the data, we do this about every 4 years on behalf of all the funders, the health funders. When you look at the split for that, about a half of it comes from industry and about a half comes from charities and public funders. And if you look at that, about 1.3 billion comes from NIHR and about 1.5 billion come through UK research innovation, in which MRC sits. So it's a complicated landscape now, and exactly how this jigsaw fits together is challenging. So this shows you the translational pathway from basic research on the far left through early clinical trials to health technology assessment and application in the NHS. We have the research councils on the left, NIHR on the right, a number of other organisations in the devolved administrations who directly fund research in this space, Office for Life Sciences, our charity partners in the life sciences industry. It's complicated. So what should the MRC do? Well, as alluded to you at the start, I think the critical issue is for the MRC to recognise its role in this landscape, its distinctive role. For me, its distinctive role is to do sponsor high-risk, high-reward science, the sorts of things that charities won't touch because they're not translated enough, the sorts of things that industry won't touch because they're too risky. We should be doing the risky work that makes the discoveries, that drives the engine for translation through our relationship with NIHR. So what does this mean in practice? Well, what does the MRC wish to do? It aims to improve human health and drive economic growth through a mechanistic understanding of biology and disease, to enable early diagnosis, advanced therapies, and precision prevention. For me, the key word in that statement is mechanistic. I think we need to get experimental and move on from our observational studies if we're going to really understand what's going on and generalise our findings for the benefit of society. It breaks down into 3 bits: early diagnosis, advanced treatments, and precision prevention. And we look at that in a number of tasks. The tasks are listed here. We're very keen to develop a deeper understanding, an integrated understanding of disease mechanisms across scales, from molecules right the way through to populations, and to experimentally validate our observations and our discoveries in model systems, animal and non-animal systems, and in humans. And we're doing this to define new diagnostic and prognostic biomarkers and targets for advanced therapies. And we have a role to de-risk those new therapies through experimental medicine and through early phase trials before we pass on the baton to commercial entities or the NIHR. We're committed to developing new vaccines, particularly in the cancer space. We have a new program in that arena. And on the precision prevention side, we want to build on what's been developed over decades through our cohorts, including UK Biobank and now our Future Health, to understand the diversity of risk factors and phenotypes in the population. And I wanted to get beyond the observational to experimentally evaluate any interventions, be they biomedical or social, through some of our partnerships. So we need to adopt and resource the best technologies. We've heard about some of them that you have here at Queen Square: functional genomics, living models, human organoids, for example, imaging across scales from the micro through to the macro, quantum sensing, DNA, RNA and cell therapies, engineering, biology, digital and tech, of course, and our population cohorts. And experimental interventions for me are absolutely key, and integrating our data in the most effective way and using advanced analytics will get the best value for money out of the work we do. We can't do it alone. We have partners in UKRI. You can see how these are research councils that broadly map to these areas, and we work extremely closely with NIHR. There are at least 20 different initiatives and schemes that we jointly resource and deliver. Either they deliver them or we deliver them, in order to ensure there's no gap in this early translational space, and there's a pipeline for you all to access to mature your ideas. We work with charities, increasingly with Wellcome, the Office for Life Sciences, Innovate UK and industry, and we wrap all this together around our people and our infrastructure that we resource, with an eye on commercialisation, so that the ideas that come out of this are actually exploited for the common good. So that's the MRC on a slide. It's challenging. As I mentioned, we do this analysis on behalf of the health funders every 4 years, and there are some emerging trends which predate my time. So this is data gathered between 2004 until 2022. There's always a bit of a lag. And it shows you health spend across the government and charity space. So all the charities, us, NIHR, and also Research England, as best we can. It's quite labour intensive to gather this. And it really breaks it down from the underpinning and underpinning and etiological work around disease, through prevention, diagnosis, treatment evaluations, right through to health service research. And there are some good news stories in this data. You can see that our commitment across the country to translational research has increased. It's increased by about 13% in real terms. This is accounting for inflation. But there are also some rather disturbing trends, and that has evolved over the last decade, which is there's a significant decrease in underpinning discovery, curiosity-driven research, dropped by about 40% in real terms in the UK, and also etiological research. This is a challenge which I think we have to fix. You can break this data down by disease category, and of course here this evening we're interested in neurological research, which does pretty well. You get about 10% of all funding in research, and I'm sure some of the general health relevance is also maps onto neurological disease, but you can see the trend. The figure is going down in real terms. So there are serious challenges ahead for us. In the last spending review, and we're just entering the last year of that period of time, we got a 9% uplift to UKRI funding, which has largely disappeared through inflation. I'm accountable for a devolved budget of around 850 million into the Medical Research Council, and you can see how we spend it. About a third is on the kind of grants you would apply to through our research funding boards and panels. We put about 10% into training and careers, 20% into our research institutes, and 20% into MRC units, which I'll come to. That's roughly the way the split is, and actually it has been for quite some time, which is an interesting question in itself. As you know, we have had the last quinquennial review for our MRC units and are moving to a new model, Centres of Research Excellence. These are fully embedded in our university partners as a partnership, funded in a slightly different way through the full economic costing model. And I can tell you we're making exactly the same proportional commit to our budget. So we're not reducing spend in this space. We're essentially looking at the portfolio again, asking the question, what are the big research challenges that will require £50 million over 14 years to address, to make real progress in. And so over the next 5 years, the units will come to an end, and we have a competition running at present for the third round of Centres of Research Excellence. to identify where these new areas are, and I would encourage you to engage this opportunity. This is the first round. It shows you what the odds were the first time round. It took about 18 months to run from start to finish. We got 28 applications. They were filtered on triage, and 2 have been put forward for funding. We haven't announced them yet, partly because of the election and all sorts of issues to do with when we're allowed to announce them, but it's imminent. One of them is a partnership with the British Heart Foundation, which also just made the logistics a little complex, but we'll announce very shortly what those 2 are. I think you'll look at them and think they're very sensible moves. I'd like to dispel the myth that we're moving solely in a translational direction. The current core round 3, there are no specific targeted areas. We're interested in the ideas you will put forward, and those ideas could be a very fundamental scientific question about a molecule or a mechanism that you think will be important for biomedical science. We're equally interested in that as we are in translation, so please do engage that opportunity. So, since 2018, MRC has been one of 9 components of UK research and innovation. We sit in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. I suppose indirectly we can thank Fletcher for that. It's the largest public funder of research and innovation, and with it comes opportunities. If you look at the health spend across UKRI in this diagram here on the right, what you'll see is something that really surprised me when I first saw it. Yes, the MRC is a big beast, but it's only just over half the spend. There's substantial investment in the health space from Innovate UK, EPSRC and BBSRC, and in fact all the research councils contribute to health research. So think beyond the MRC for your work if that's relevant. And with UKRI comes expertise, comes strategic themes funded above the research councils in healthy ageing and well-being, and tackling infections would be relevant to this audience. There is a substantial infrastructure fund, which I'll touch on. There is now an open second cross-council response mode scheme, which is discipline agnostic. It's deliberately designed to fund things that would normally be very difficult to fund within councils. And of course, there's the Future Leader Fellowships scheme, which is a cross-UKRI initiative. This is new money that came in after the last spending review. And we're working, particularly with EPSRC and BBSRC, around new technologies in a synergistic way. The infrastructure fund is substantial. It's allowed us to provide, through our colleagues in the department, DSIT, £125 million to UK Biobank to put this on a very solid footing for the next 10 years and to move its facilities to the centre of Manchester. We resource Health Data Research UK, which knits together data science and health data across the country to allow researchers to access it to do biomedical research. And future infrastructure includes the Adolescent Health Study. Cathy Sudlow has just been appointed director of this. The aim is to recruit 100,000 people aged 8 to 18 and follow them over a decade to understand the challenges that they face and the determinants of disease that emerge during adolescence. And with BBSRC, we've put 34 million into the EBI site to develop Biofair, which is effectively a framework to allow the presentation of different biological data sets so that you can access them and analyse them. And last but not least, the Total Body PET programme driven by the MRC with new centres for whole body PET imaging in King's and in Edinburgh and Manchester. So to deliver translation, we work extremely closely with NIHR. We're in contact on a daily basis. Traditionally, following the Cooksey review 15 odd years ago, MRC agreed to handle this end of the translational pipeline and NIHR here. And we have several schemes that sit in the interface to ensure that there is no gap for you developing your ideas. Our colleagues in UKRI work with us on this pipeline too, as do charities and Wellcome. We can only deliver translation by partnering with industry. The MRC does this in several different ways. We have direct partnerships with some of our research institutes and national competitions with major pharma. We have industry representation on almost all of our advisory groups to keep us grounded in the whole landscape. For our intramural programs, we've just flipped to LGC to handle our intellectual property, And we have a number of schemes that you'll be familiar with that specifically are designed for industry collaborations in translation. And it works. If you look at the spin-out review that Irene Tracy came out with and was published earlier this year, the MRC is the single biggest success story from all government funders in terms of generating spin-out companies. It's not the full answer, but it shows that to some extent this works. We leverage money in the grants that we award in the translational space, and we have strong partnerships. This data is a little out of date now. There's a new version of this going to be published in a few months' time, which shows an even stronger picture. But the truth is, the MRC, although we have an intramural footprint, we can only do this in partnership with our university colleagues. We have 5 research institutes, 3 of them are partnerships. You're deeply connected with all 3 of these, and we value that because that's how we can jointly address the research agenda. Our units, as I mentioned, are transforming into a different model, the core model, which I'd encourage you to engage with. So it's not all doom and gloom. And this is what the MRC looks like in 2024. If you count in all the extra spend through infrastructure and cross-UK activity that maps to our space, it amounts to about £1 billion. We've got over 3,000 active awards, 1,600 students. We're supporting thousands of investigators across the country and internationally. We work with 127 higher education institutions in addition to our national institutes. We're leveraging investment through our commercial activity, contributing to innovation and growth. The most recent data shows that for every £1 that the MRC has spent on translation, there has been £5.30 leveraged through joint industry investment. And we've generated lots of spin-out companies over the years. This is just for one calendar year. So this is what I have to deal with. So I'd like to spend perhaps 5 minutes longer, Mike, if that's all right. Hopefully I've convinced you that actually the MRC needs to learn an awful lot from history, from the characters that we recognise, that we've known personally, and also those who are written about in the history books. And also the founding principles of the MRC, I believe, still hold true today, and we should revisit those, get back to those core values. So we've come full circle. That's one reason for what goes around comes around. But it's also a little more interesting than that, because if you go right back to that original building that the MRC had in Queen Street, it's down here just south of St James's Park. And during the Second World War, they decamped to Whitehall, but took advantage of some Crown estate that became available on Regent's Park Crescent, and many of you will remember this. Were eventually asked to leave as the Crown estate had ideas to redevelop it, moved to Kemble Street, and then spent a brief period of time down on Victoria Embankment, and 2 years ago were on the top floor of Caxton House, which is the Department of Work and Pensions. So we've come full circle. What goes around comes around. Now, interestingly, we're now rather close to number 10 Downing Street, and that has pros and cons attached to it. But I think as long as we remember what JBS Haldane told us, that it's absolutely appropriate that government asks us to focus our endeavours in certain areas of health and economic need. This is a pneumoconiosis unit in South Wales. But the decisions about who receives the funding and how that funding is implemented should be left to our peers. And that's what the MRC does. Fundamentally, that is what we do. And interestingly, if you walk down Queen Anne's Gate, which is the road just down here, you'll see this blue plaque, Lord Haldane. Now, Lord Haldane was the brother of JBS Haldane, and that plaque is about halfway between Caxton House and 10 Downing Street. That cannot be a coincidence. I'd like to spend the last 5 minutes talking about something that I know will be important to you and really links into this picture here. It's about the coalface. It's about our workforce, and in particular, our clinical academic workforce. Because there is an emerging problem here. It's been going on for over a decade. The Medical Schools Council have helped us measure this. And what you can see on this graph since 2012 until 2022 is a progressive decrease in the number of consultants in the NHS who are academically active. It's almost halved. And also, during that period of time, a tiny number of general practitioners are academically engaged, and that really hasn't changed an awful lot. And as the NHS continues to expand, this gap is widening. It's a decrease both in real terms and in relative terms. It's even more prominent. There's been a net loss of 189 to the clinical academic workforce, a drop of 311 readers. This has been partly addressed by an increase in lecturers and professors, but there is an emerging gap. And it's even more worrying if you look at the age demographic. So you can see here the age trends across this same period of time. For the very first time, there are more active researchers who are over 60 than under 35. So this problem is getting worse. We are not repopulating the pipeline with researchers of the future. And under Laura Kakar's oversight, I set up a task and finish group to look at this, to try and identify some new elements to this that we might be able to fix and come up with some potential solutions. So we brought together a number of stakeholders, the funders, ourselves, Wellcome, NIHR, Cancer Research UK, British Heart Foundation, devolved nation representatives, critically the NHS. Steve Powers from the NHS England was there, our universities through Research England, industry representatives, and a voice from our trainees. And we looked at the reasons and evaluated the causes, in part through a survey across over 2,000 trainees nationally. The data was gathered within 2 weeks. It's extraordinary. There's clearly a lot of feeling out there about it. And we found that there were a number of system drivers, some of which you'll recognise. Previous guidance rules, if you like, for the research evaluation framework has driven part of the decline in clinical academics. Universities are in a difficult financial place at present, and clinical academics are expensive. And the pressures from the NHS to contribute to the service are also driving this problem. There are some disincentives. It's always been a challenge training both in research and in medicine, but there have been some interventions in recent years that have made that even worse, particularly in neurology and other specialities where you have to train in general medicine too. This is lengthening our training, particularly in comparison to North America, and there are very good case studies describing very bright individuals who just bailed out and went to the US to complete their training faster and are now having fruitful careers there. And there are some new pressures. There have been some changes in the way the academic, early academic positions have been implemented across the country, which have not gone down well, let's put it that way, and have been a disincentive. Most people are qualifying with substantial debt, which I didn't have the problem of when I qualified. And I think that there are changing attitudes amongst junior colleagues about whether or not they're prepared to tolerate career uncertainty, what their expectations are for their career, which we have to be honest about and face if we're going to fix this problem. And so we've put into place an action plan to address these. We started with the medics. There's a parallel activity going on for non-medical health professionals led by Jessica Corner and the academic nurses. And we plan to move on to dental and public health. And we've come up with a list of 6 recommendations, which I don't plan to go through in detail. I'll just focus on action 1 and 2 in the next slide. But critically, we need visible leadership and mentorship delivered by established researchers, us. We need to look critically at pay and remuneration and pensions, because this is an issue that's disincentivizing junior colleagues, difficult problem in the current climate. We need to revisit the follow-up procedures so that we properly do proper joint performance evaluation with our university colleagues to incentivize people along the right direction. And finally, we need to see whether or not any of these interventions make any difference, and the Academy of Medical Sciences will be helping us in this regard. So this is the integrated care pathway that the funders have come up with. It's not rocket science. It breaks down training into a number of phases from pre-medical school right through to becoming an independent researcher, but critically we need to ensure an alignment between funders. So we're all saying the same thing, doing the same thing. Because I think by doing that, it will show junior colleagues that actually the risks aren't as bad as might first meet the eye, but it's such a complex landscape. All of the fellowship schemes don't quite align, and we've committed to get them all in line over the coming year. There are clearly some valleys of death, as it were, in the postdoctoral phase, which we need to address through our own resources as funders, and we are looking at those options at the present moment. And we also need to think long term. There is no point in training these individuals if there are no university positions ahead. And we need to think creatively about how we might enable portfolio careers for individuals, part in academia, part in the NHS, part in industry, possibly through their own startups, that might fix some of these issues and give a rewarding, enriching career for the next generation. This is what we want to achieve: a clear, simpler, more flexible and attractive pathway for clinical research careers. And the report will be published shortly. It's with ministers at the moment, hopefully for their endorsement and sign-off. So everything that I've described to you today is entirely consistent with the life sciences vision written during the tenure of the previous government, and is also entirely consistent with the Labour prescription for growth in the life sciences, which was published before the election. I was on the Life Sciences Council this week, and both Secretaries of State for Department of Health, Social Care and also Science, Innovation and Technology are absolutely committed to grow this sector, to improve the health, that's one of the government missions, and to promote economic growth, that's the overarching government mission. So it's going to be tough. I think that the spending situation is not great from all that we've heard, but I think this is a dip, and we'll pull out the other side, and working with you all, hopefully will make the differences that we want to see. So why have I called it Medical Research Dial 111? Well, when I got the job, one of the very senior fellows in my college in Cambridge, Anthony Edwards, distinguished geneticist, said he was very pleased that I'd been given the job. He remembered in the 1970s when he'd finished his lectureship in St Andrews, he realised he'd only got 3 weeks' salary left. And so he rang the chief executive of the MRC, and the following day a cheque came with 2 years' salary and an IBM computer attached to it. I'm afraid it doesn't work like that anymore, and 111 is definitely not my phone number, but the reason why I say dial 111, it should really be dial back 111, because it's the 111th birthday of the Medical Research Council this year. I feel very privileged and daunted to have the honour of leading this organisation. But we don't do research, you do research. And if you work with us, we'll achieve great things. Thank you very much.
So it falls to me to give the vote of thanks to Patrick Chinnery. It's not going to be hard, is it? That was a fantastic lecture. When you have a lecture so erudite, so on the money, it's going to be easy. So the hard bit for me is that it's only a few minutes before there's some refreshments outside. Now, before saying a few nice things about Patrick and about the MRC, let me just go off piste a bit and just give a vote of thanks to all of you, to Mike, his leadership team, and the whole of the Institute of Neurology. Now, I haven't been coming to these for 60 years. In fact, I'm not sure there's anyone in the room who's been coming to these for 60 years. But I have been coming to them for over a quarter of a century. And I think it's worth, just for those of us in the room who have also been coming to them for a quarter of a century, or indeed for slightly more than that for some of us in the room, just to reflect on just how colleagues in the room, colleagues not in the room, directors, former directors, how much impact that has had cumulatively over the last few years. It is phenomenal that a department in UCL can claim a Nobel Prize winner as one of its alumni. But it is also phenomenal that a department in UCL can claim, for example, such a pivotal place in the development of drugs like lecanemab. And that's, of course, just one example that I've picked. Mike had more. So I just want to pause there and say thank you from the whole of UCL for all of the impact and all of the amazing work that is done at the Institute of Neurology. But back to saying some nice things about Patrick. And I think he played it down, but I want to just start in terms of my opening remarks by saying it's not easy to be a funder in today's world. It's a problem of complexity, and and Patrick introduced some of those, and Mike talked about others. Complexity of the challenge. The world is changing, demography is changing, people are aging. We heard about how 1 in 3 people will get Alzheimer's disease in their lifetime, and in the UK 1.7 million people will be living with Alzheimer's by 2040. And the demographic changes that accompany that will place a huge burden. Even before we think about the burden of delivering drugs like lecanemab in an NHS that frankly is not set up to deliver that kind of interventional treatment, no matter how amazing it is. And there's of course the burden of mental health as another neurologically adjacent disease or set of diseases, and how that is affecting young people. And that's before we even think about the impact of climate change, as Mike highlighted with Sanjay Sisodia, on all of those things. So it's a bit of a different world to when tuberculosis and muscle mass was the key problem. It's also a complex ecosystem we live in, and I think Patrick touched upon that a little. No longer do we just have a couple of universities, I shan't name them, but they're in the outer suburbs of London, doing the good work. We have a whole plethora of universities, the length and breadth of the UK, doing outstanding work. But not only that, research organisations large and small, the kind of spin-outs large and small that Mike talked about, large corporate entities, and so on and so forth, plus the success not only of national funding agencies like UKRI and MRC, but the plethora of charitable sector, the growth and expansion of the charitable sector in this space. What that means for a funder is that it's very difficult to press here, and it causes all sorts of ripple effects, or take money away there. And it's a little more difficult, I think, for funders to make the right choices in that complex landscape. And the final complexity I'll highlight before saying formal thank yous is the complexity of the geopolitics that is all around us. So when our current administration talks, for example, about the importance of growth and productivity and jobs, which we could all get behind, the technologies that are going to drive that are technologies like artificial intelligence, advanced therapeutics, all areas that are now the subject of economic and political competition and are subject to what great power competition thinks about. So in a globalized world, an institute like the Institute of Neurology or a funder like the MRC has to think about those issues in ways they certainly didn't have to. So I want to say 3 thank yous to Patrick. The first thank you is obvious. It's for the MRC. We heard about it being 111 years old from its roots in 1913 all the way up to the present day. So it's a little bit older than the Institute of Neurology, a little bit younger than the National Hospital or UCL, but it has that same quality of longevity. I would suggest it has one other quality which I really prize, indefatigability, the ability to keep pressing on. And I think it's the combination of longevity and indefatigability that has given the MRC its particular contribution to global health and health of patients across the world. So to take an example outside the neurological realm, the work on chemotherapy in the 1950s that then led to the series of clinical trials on childhood leukemia in the 1970s, just pressing on one step at a time, took us from a time where 90% of children died to a time when 90% of children survived. And I think it's that combination of being able to ask the blue sky, difficult, big questions with the ability to keep buggering on, as Winston Churchill would have said, over those problems that gives the MRC its 32 Nobel Prizes. A very impressive total, I should say, which UCL, despite its striving, was only able to match this year with our 2 Nobel Prizes getting to 32. Same as the MRC. So a big thank you to the MRC. The second thank you I'd like to say to Patrick is a thank you for reminding us of the importance of medical research. Now, you might say that's obvious, medical research. We all know, sitting in this room, its importance to saving lives or changing the lives of patients and carers across the world. Yes, 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 I don't mean like that. Patrick also reminded us of the importance of how you do medical research, not just medical research as an intrinsic good, but that we have to think through the ecosystems we create, the fragility of those ecosystems, the complexity of those ecosystems, and we have to think deeply about how to optimize them. So, for example, in his closing remarks on clinical academic practice, he highlighted something that we all feel and we all know. But you don't need to go that far from this room, let me tell you, to find people who just think that medical research falls out of the sky somewhere in a foreign land and just it magically appears in the textbooks. So I think we all have a job to do with the MRC, explaining not just the benefits of medical research and how they affect every single citizen's lives, but also that how we do it is important, and whether it's, as Patrick said, thinking about the fundamental discovery science as well as how it's translated, as well as, I should say, prevention as well, which is another real diddy bit of the MRC portfolio. That's an important thing. So thank you for reminding us of that. And my final thank you is to Patrick himself as a leader. Leadership is something that people have to choose. It's not thrust upon them. And it's a risk. For many of us, it's easier to sit on the sidelines being terribly critical, and academics are great at being terribly critical about literally everything. And that criticism has a place. But leadership is a risk because it involves putting yourself out there. It involves saying what you believe in and bringing people along with you. It's about not shying away from those difficult discussions, those disagreements that we might have, but encouraging those conversations and bringing them to a satisfactory conclusion. And it's about getting the right balance between organisational stability and organisational change. Because without change, we wouldn't have an MRC that has evolved in the way it has in the 111 years of its history. So we won't always agree with what Patrick and his colleagues say or do, but that's fine. We should still be very grateful for their leadership and for stepping forward and for delivering what they do, both for the Institute of Neurology, for UCL, and ultimately for the nation. So that is really all I wanted to say by way of thanks, but I think we should close before we say that with a big round of applause to say thank you again, Professor Patrick Chinnery. Thank you to whoever's on the phone, and let's go